La-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da. The cuffs are off, man. Get right.
Hey everybody, Adam Rank here.
What's up, friends? Daniel Dopp here from the Fantasy Focused Football Podcast over on ESPN.
It's Fabs here, Michael Fabiano from Sports Illustrated.
Hey fans, this is AJ Dillon of the Green Bay Packers.
I got to give a shout out to y'all at Get Right Fantasy.
You know who you can trust? If you've got some questions about your fantasy squad,
If you are not subscribed, what are you waiting for? You want to lose your league? If you want to check out a cool show on YouTube that'll help you get ready for the fantasy football season,
check out the Get Right Fantasy Network.
check out the Get Right Fantasy Network. You got to get right with the Get Right Fantasy Network.
Best of luck with your podcast. Appreciate the support.
Get you right. Enjoy the show.
And I'm getting down cause I run my sleeves up. And I'm getting right cause I run my sleeves up. And I'm getting down cause I run my sleeves up. And I'm getting right cause I get.
What up? Welcome to another episode of The Extra Point, of course, hosted by Get Right Fantasy Network. It's your boy, Phil Ruskin. I got my guys, Kendall and Shane, hanging out from the Fantasy Football Tavern and Draft Sharks. Kendall, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to give us a really badass intro on Shane, because I feel like we're super stoked to have him, and we could sit here and talk about all the cool shit he's doing, but we know we got to get into some pretty good content tonight. So if you wouldn't mind introducing our guest, I think the people would love it.
Oh, you know it would be my pleasure. So let's roll out the red carpet. Ladies and gentlemen, Shane has spent 100% of more than the last 2 decades, 20 years as an industry professional. Definitely has the dedicated writing side, member of the FSWA and the Football Writers Association of America as well. So love the industry creds. And right now, I have to give Shane a huge shout out because what he's doing over at Draft Sharks, they just dropped their rookie guide for 2025. I have to say, honestly, I actually use it myself to do some quick references. Super clean graphically. I'm pretty impressed with everything they've done this year. So 20 years of industry experience from the writing, now over at Draft Sharks, and was giving me a lot of dynasty advice when he was back over at DLF as well. So he's played with the big boys and is one himself. So welcome everyone, Mr. Shane P. Hallam.
Awesome. Well, Shane, awesome to have you, man. Yeah, please feel free to tell the people where they can find you. Of course, take some time we're more than happy to let you plug your own content and where everybody can find all the writing and, of course, anything else that you've got that is going to help fantasy players get better and, of course, win their leagues.
No, I appreciate you guys, Kendall. I appreciate the kind words as well. Yeah, I've been covering the NFL draft, and especially from a fantasy perspective. This will be my 22nd draft that I've covered. So it's been kind of a long road, and finally going full time with Draft Sharks, who take a lot of this seriously, have a lot of tools built in. But our rookie guide, I pushed to go to 100 players this year. It's free. Go to draftsharks.com. At the bottom, just put in your email. You get the guide for free. Like I said, 100 QBs, running backs, receivers, tight ends, skill positions only, just for fantasy, just to help you. We have profiles on all of them. We have our own in-house analytical model that we've graded all the players on, et cetera, et cetera. So you can check that out, projections, fantasy values, all of that over there. And then myself and Kevin English, our other Dynasty analyst, have been doing profiles on the top guys. Breaking down film is my specialty. That's where I started, really, in the film game. And so all of our individual articles, I did one on Ashton Jeanty, Tyler Warren, Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward. I show the film. The film is in the article. You can see what I'm watching, see what I'm breaking down. I explain it. I think that's how you get people better at actually seeing, instead of just listening to people vomit up words. You get to actually see it and see what I'm looking at and saying. So that's my favorite thing to do, and I'm excited to do that with you guys here.
I love that. And I'll be honest. I think for me, that's Kendall knows this. Shane, I know this is the first time we've had a chance to work together. But like, I'm a former coach. So like for me, film is everything, right? It tells you what you're doing well, tells you where there's areas of improvement. But I think for fantasy players, we can go read all the stats we want, and you can go find anything you want from what's their college production profile, how's this going to translate. But when you get somebody with some expertise that's looking at the film and is actually talking through throwing mechanics, what's their footwork going to look like? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that gives you that little edge, and that's what the Extra Point's all about. At the end of the day, like, I created this show a couple years ago to find that 1% that could separate you from the other 11 guys in the league, 9 guys in your league, right? That's going to help you get that edge, draft the right guy, and hopefully get yourself a championship and a ring. So stoked to have these boys here tonight, and we got a lot to talk about. It is, of course, less than 30 days away till the actual NFL draft. We've got rookies tonight that we're going to be profiling. We're going to be talking through. Why don't we start at the top? And why don't we go through these quarterbacks? I think the consensus at this point is that Cam Ward's going to be the 101 to Tennessee. Doesn't seem like that pick's going to get traded. It seems like he will be their selection. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because I've got some other topics I want to talk about here at the quarterback position. But Shane, I want to start with you because you just mentioned it. You did a profile on Shedeur, and I think if my memory's right, yesterday or today was his pro day or his whatever they call it, showcase day at Dion. He's got to dress it up in Colorado. Is it a possibility we could see Shedeur slide? And if we do, how far? And how does that impact fantasy players?
I think it's a possibility. My breakdown of him, I am much lower on him than the consensus in the NFL, especially from a fantasy perspective. When Shedeur Sanders enters the league, he's going to be and starts. He's going to be only one of 2 starting NFL quarterbacks right now with negative college rushing yards. Jared Goff is the other, who, had his struggles early in his career, right? To get to where he is, needed the perfect kind of scheme and system. And I think that's really where Shedeur stands with a player who's has a little bit of more athleticism than those numbers show, but isn't going to run the ball often. I think has a lot of bad tendencies in the pocket, drops too far when things aren't open, wants to make that completion almost always. To me, it's his arm just isn't there. And I think there's going to be teams like the Giants, right, that went to Cam Ward's pro day. He's probably not going to make it to you. Went today to watch Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. And I think with the moves the Giants have made, it seems like they're probably going to pass. So I think it'll fall a little bit. I don't think Shedeur Sanders is going to, be a late first-round pick. Because it only takes one team, I think, that convinces themselves, hey, we need this quarterback. And so I think he still goes in the top 10 or someone moves up for him. But, he's not my number 2 quarterback in the class. And I think when we look back in 5 or 6 years, I don't think Sanders is going to sit as the second best QB in this class.
I'm with you. I think Kendall and I share opinion. We've both talked about this in the group chat. We've talked about it individually on this show, is that I just am not sold. Same things you just said. Some of the mechanics, it all looks great when you're standing there and, your athletic shorts and no pressure throwing a deep ball 60, 70 yards. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, what do you do when Chris Jones is, rushing the passer? That's a very different answer to a question that we're going to have to see. So, Shane, I want to stay on you real quick, though. You said he's not your number 2, and I do want to talk about quarterbacks 3, 4, and 5. Who is your number 2 quarterback in this class, and what are some of the things that you like about him that's elevated that guy above Shedeur?
So Jackson Dart from Mississippi is my number 2 quarterback. I think he's riskier than Shedeur Sanders. I think Shedeur Sanders will be fine. I think Jackson Dart has the ability to be a superstar, especially from our perspective as a fantasy football player. And I remember him starting at 18 years old at USC and really impressing as a true freshman. That early breakout, I think, means something. And the fact that he went to Mississippi, still in that Lane Kiffin offense, definitely has flashed. I think his great games are among the best in this class. I'd put him up there with Cam Ward. His bad games are among the worst in this class. If you look at Georgia, the second half against Florida, really bad. And that's always a tough evaluation of, how do you manage that? So I don't really buy the top 10 hype for Jackson Dart. I think more of the late first into the second. But I think he has the footwork. I think he has kind of that quick release. If you can get him to take snaps from under center, get him to improve in terms of the footwork aspect, I think he has a lot of those traits that you look for in a franchise quarterback. A lot of the off-the-field leadership pieces seem to be there from all accounts. And to me, that means a lot as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. So you've covered the draft now 22 plus years. Give me 2 teams scheme, fit, whatever it is that you like, that you think he would be if they were to able to select him, where you think he could have the biggest fantasy impact?
So kind of, that's a good balance, right? Of like, best fit isn't always best fantasy fit either.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I think Pittsburgh is a good fit for him, and I think we could see potential good fantasy fit. Now, they're not going to have a high pass rate necessarily that we look for, but adding DK Metcalf in the offseason, I think Arthur Smith's offense does like to get the ball out, fairly quickly, and then use that play action to get the ball down the field and push it down the field. Seems to be what Pittsburgh's trying to kind of build there. They're still going to have the backbone of the run game. So I would like that fit for Jackson Dart. Would probably be my favorite of the teams that I think are most likely to take him. The other one will probably be, now he wouldn't start year one, but I think the Rams are a team he's mocked too often. That I like that Sean McVay offense. I would like Jackson Dart to have some time to sit for a year and get better. And I think we've seen, Sean McVay pull a lot out of Jared Goff. We've seen him pull a lot out of Matthew Stafford, where you're using some of the levels concepts in that offense that gives Dart kind of some easy reads. I think McVay's offense is complex, but allows quarterbacks to build in. I think that could really work for him.
Yeah, I like both those landing spots. The Steelers are going to be everyone's hot choice right now until Aaron Rodgers comes out of his little hobbit hole there and whatever he's doing and actually makes a decision. I think it's going to be everyone projecting the Steelers to grab somebody. So Kendall, Shane was talking a little bit about Shedeur not having the greatest rushing profile. Jalen Milroe, who's in this mix here, maybe not the best passer in this class, but does rush a lot. So how do you see Milroe? And, is he a guy that if you think is, I think probably a second round pick, what is kind of your outlook on him in year one, knowing he's probably not going to be a day one starter?
So I've got a split take on Milroe, and because it's draft season, I think it's a good exercise to look at it from the fantasy player perspective completely exclusively and see what we see, and then look at it from the NFL perspective and just give yourself kind of a more holistic view. Maybe we're aligned, though. I think the NFL and fantasy players saw A-Rich, and we both see, okay, he's A-Rich, but we already know what he is. So now what do we do, right? Now, now that it may be different price. So what do we do, right? It's weird because this class, from a fantasy perspective, is so chalky with running back. So your second and third round picks have a lot of juice to them. Potentially, if you're playing Dynasty the right way, going wide receiver heavy, this is a good time to restock from the discipline that you hopefully did in 2024, right? Where he goes or where he might go, NFL draft hasn't happened yet, right? We still think fantasy-wise, he later in Superflex, but it's so hard to take such a project over what I think is still pretty solid running backs in even the third round. So I like him better, almost more interesting from the NFL perspective than I do fantasy football perspective. I just can't see drafting him. Like, I can see drafting him in a startup more often than I can in my rookie draft, if that makes sense. Because if I'm QB needy, I need something more solid. And if I'm not QB needy, I'm probably playing the right way, and I'm going to take running back in that spot. So I have him pretty suppressed in my rankings, but that's to no fault of his own. From a player perspective, I think you kind of know what you get. We'll see what he can develop, but he is a phenomenal runner. I think he could be better than Lamar Jackson, potentially, with the way he runs the ball. But I don't see him as a quarterback, unfortunately. That's the tough part. I don't see him as another quarterback.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Milroe. Obviously, I'm an SEC guy, right? Gainesville, Florida. At the end of the day, I watch a ton of SEC football, so I've seen him play 20, 30 games. At the end of it all, I think there are players that are certainly better in college, and it doesn't translate to the NFL. I think he's going to be productive. He's certainly going to make a roster. What was it 2 seasons ago, Kendall? What was my stat? 62 quarterbacks ended up starting a game in 2023. So, look, we know the way that the NFL works and the injury rate. So at some point, I think he's going to have a couple. It could be week 16, 17, 18 when you're in the playoffs, which means you're not playing him anyway. But in a dynasty format, I'll just give please don't do this, but there is a league that I am in that is drafting right now. I didn't know that. It said April 1st. I thought it said May 1st. That was my own error. But some social proof right now. This is a 12-team. It's a best ball league, but it's best ball dynasty. It is super flex. Cam Ward went at the 102. Shedeur Sanders went at the 109. Jackson Dart went at the 203, and then I at the 209 did draft Jalen Milroe because I needed a quarterback. So I do think that it's good value at the 209, late second round. It's probably where I expect him to be. Not expecting much from him, but I have Will Levis and Dak Prescott on that roster, and Will Levis, we think, is potentially about to lose his job. So I needed somebody. Did either of you guys want to talk about Quinn Ewers? Because I didn't love him at Texas. I still don't think he's a great prospect. He gives me Kenny Pickett vibes. So does anyone, am I wrong? Shane, do you have a different take on the translation from Texas to wherever Quinn Ewers is going to land? And does he make a roster as a QB2 or QB3?
I think he can stick around on those physical tools, right there. I mean, there's a reason that Quinn Ewers was one of the best QB recruits of all time. As not just 5-star quarterback, but one of the best ever, because he has that arm that can really hit any point of the field, and we've seen him flash that ability specifically against Alabama twice. When he really did his best work. The problem, I think, came when he was facing some more incompetent defenses and struggled to be consistent in terms of his accuracy, as well as I think a lot of his pre-snap and post-snap reads. He wasn't asked to do a lot at Texas, and when things were covered, I think it's really when he struggled. You add in the injuries, AC joint sprain, ankle, torn oblique. It's just there's a lot working against him. I mean, I think Quinn Ewers, maybe a team takes a shot in the third round. I think we could see a lot of these quarterbacks go in the third to fourth round. I think he'll probably be in there more drafted, as a backup in the NFL.
Yeah, agreed. So before we move into the wide receivers, just always want to show some love to the folks in the comments. We appreciate y'all being here, supporting the show. I don't think this one's too surprising, but Gav Leaf writes in, from what I've been hearing, if Shador's dad wasn't who he is, we wouldn't be talking about Shador Sanders. I don't know that we wouldn't be talking about him. I certainly think that the last name bump helps. Shane, go ahead.
I'll say it's going to be interesting because this is going to be the first time since 8th grade that he'll have played on a team where his dad was not a coach on the team. Now that could be a good thing. That could be maybe Dion held him back a little bit too, right? I mean, I think there's some pressure that comes with that. So I'm interested to see.
For sure. And then Shane, a question for you from our own classic Mike. What are your thoughts on Kyle McCord? Obviously, as the in-house Giants fan, he's hoping that they wait for him in the third.
I think he's kind of in that Ewers. I think Kyle McCord, Ewers, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel are kind of in that third to fourth mix. I mean, McCord is another player who had a lot of really solid tape with Syracuse this year. Definitely improved from the Ohio State game, then had that awful Pitt game where he's throwing picks and getting pressured. I think McCord in a clean pocket is someone that can, start a couple games for you and be good. Probably not someone I'd want as a starter. So I think if the Giants pass, it's a possibility. My pick probably for that like day 2 quarterback that could be a superstar is Tyler Shock from Louisville, who has the arm and the 4.6 speed. And, so I'd probably take him over McCord, but I think we're going to get a decent amount of top 125 quarterbacks here.
Yeah. It's interesting you just brought his name up because I also have been very interested to see what he does and where he goes. He's a player that I'm keeping an eye on in my drafts and potentially the third round if you kind of late steal him in your dynasty draft, stash him.
He's my QB4. I have him above Milroe.
Wow.
So I think Milroe. I don't think Milroe's going day 2 of the NFL draft. So I do like the upside that Kendall and you talked about. I think from a rushing perspective for us in fantasy, but I'll be surprised if he goes top 100.
Well, for sure, as we all know, the rushing for the quarterbacks is a cheat code. We've seen Lamar and we've seen Jalen, just Josh Allen, the guys that everyone wants to draft Mahomes. And as much as Mahomes is getting it done in real football, at the end of the day, he's only been the quarterback one twice and not recently. So that rushing is a cheat code for sure. Before we move on, fellas, any other quarterbacks that we want to talk about? Do we want to talk about Will Howard? Is anyone else you just want to give a quick mention or, hey, this is a guy you should keep an eye on if you're on the clock late in the third, snag him, taxi squad guy that could emerge? Or are we ready to move to wide receiver?
I'll say some years, yes, not this year. In my like just from a fantasy analytical standpoint, I can draft. It's not a startup, right? If you're talking about a rookie draft,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
I know you know me. I love my draft picks. I tend
You
to
do.
I
You
will
do.
collect every 312 that someone will throw at me. I'll take it. I will absolutely take it. This is the year. Those are great picks. There's these massive tiers of running backs that I'm fine with, right? If we get into that, I love all of them, even into the 4th round, right? So I just can't find how to pick that QB over someone I think will actually have 20 carries in a game in their first year, right? Won't be every game, but the way that running backs work is, when you get the call, you get the call, right? When a rookie quarterback all of a sudden gets dropped, I'm not starting them, right? It's probably not happening. So from a production standpoint, I can't make it this year because it's an RB heavy class. And that's where I want to draft them. There's other classes where these quarterbacks I would take a shot on from a fantasy perspective, from a dynasty perspective, because like Shane mentioned, they have attributes that are like, hey, I want to see that. That could be something, right? They're attributes that are better than starting quarterbacks in the NFL. They just come with a lot of downside and risk, right? But they can elevate enough with the right coaching that they're going to have shots on them. And like you mentioned, 60 plus quarterbacks playing. It doesn't. All 32 coaches are watching every game, so it doesn't take much. Look at Josh Dobbs, right? It didn't take much for how many teams to sign him that year after a decent start or two. So I think different situation, but I do think a lot of these people are going to be rostered. I'd just rather buy him for a 3rd or a 4th when they give up hope and need other assets, or trade them for, I would rather trade for them mid-season when the hype dies down, if I'm talking as a fantasy player.
Well, and I'll say this so that we can wrap and move into the wide receiver class, but we've seen it time and time again. Let's just look at last year's class, right? Caleb Williams, 101. Not fantasy relevant for most of his weeks. Jaden crushed it. Great. Fantastic. Drake May, 103 in the draft. Didn't even start until week 4, week 5. And then even then it was like, unless he got you a rushing touchdown, he was still throwing 12 completions, 19, attempts, 170. So it wasn't great. So whereas you can go and insert a wide receiver, you can insert a running back, potentially even into your flex as early as week 1. And, you've got a more bona fide starter. So let's shift over to wide receiver, guys. Look, McMillan seems to be the consensus 101, whether that's what actually comes to fruition here at the end of the month. We're obviously going to find out, but on paper today, that's where kind of the fantasy and especially the dynasty community has him ranked. Kendall, I'll start with you. Is there potential for McMillan to have a breakout in year 1, like a Malik Neighbors, right? Like some of these guys. I'm not going to put him in the JJ category and the Chase categories. I think those two guys came into the league. They were so elite from the jump that it kind of broke the mold. I think it kind of spoiled us as fantasy owners, right? Like we almost expected now every year to have a wide receiver come in, especially an LSU wide receiver, to come in and just break the fantasy mold. And I don't know that that's always going to happen. So I want to put that next tier down. Where do you see McMillan, regardless of his landing spot? How do you see him translating here in year 1?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Because let me just preface by saying, because of his type of wide receiver, right? He's an elite X boundary, can win at a lot of levels, right? Has kind of a big build, gets comped to Mike Evans quite often. Personally, I think T. Higgins is a little bit of a better comp. Similar body type, large catch radius, comes down with their fair share of 50-50s that aren't quite fair. But I think that type of player is a little more quarterback dependent because of the types of targets they receive and them being known as red zone threats, which require quarterbacks that you as a coach actually want throwing the ball in the red zone, right? So I do think he's more quarterback dependent than others, where Neighbors is too much of a freak. He would work even with where he was at. Right. So I do think this is a little caveat, but yeah, I like Ted. I think he could be fantastic. One, I just think he's talented in a lot of ways, right? I mean, his catch radius is pretty freakish, and there's so many teams when I look at rosters that just don't have an X. So I think, much like Rome stepped into a pretty busy wide receiver room with a lot of talent, he still saw like 80-85% of snaps. I think Tet walks into that wherever he goes because of his position type. And I think there are some landing spots like the Patriots, for one. He could walk in as their actual alpha, easy 120 targets plus. And I think if he does okay in the red zone, yeah, he could have a very, very good season. I just think he's a little quarterback dependent, and he doesn't have that transcendent talent where he has to work. Like Genti has to work, in my opinion. It does not matter what roster you put him on. Where I think he could have, we won't blame him, but the points won't be on my team type of situation. I still see it as somewhat of a possibility. I'm much more bullish on him.
Shane, I want to ask you this because this is the knock on him right now is he ran the 4.540. So he's a little bit slower. It wasn't like he was a burner. He only ran it once. Kendall mentioned it, big catch radius, contested catch guy, wingspan. I mean, he's the guy that you want to throw up in the red zone. Are you as high as consensus early on here this month as the market is, or do you maybe have another guy that you're looking at as potentially the number one wide receiver in this class?
So he's my top receiver. I'm assuming that Travis Hunter does not play full-time wide receiver. I will make that caveat here in this class because I think Hunter would be it. But I don't think, if I had to bet right now, I don't think Ted McMillan would be the first wide receiver off the board in the NFL draft. I don't think that's going to happen. I think probably it's Matthew Golden out of Texas. For right or for wrong. I'd say probably for wrong. So I'm kind of with Kendall here. I like Ted McMillan. I don't think he's anywhere near the elite prospect that Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. was. I will say, we comped him in the rookie guide to Drake London, and I think he has some of those similar tendencies as kind of a big mover. I do like McMillan as a big slot. He played about a fifth of his snaps in the slot. I think that's where his best work happened. So I would be really intrigued if a team takes Ted McMillan and says, we're going to give him some slot snaps, especially for fantasy. We saw with Jamar Chase last year. The more slot snaps, the better for these guys that are really good receivers and are good athletes. The 4.540 time, it's 6'5", 212. If he was 190, then I got a problem, but that 6'5", 212, I mean, that is going to be really good. And I think he's going to be able to contend with most corners. So I'm still there. He popped outside of Hunter as the top receiver in our rookie model, analytically. So I think there's a lot of boxes to check. I think if you're expecting Ted McMillan to be Mike Evans, then you're going to be disappointed, or Chase or Jefferson. I think if you're expecting more T. Higgins, then I think it's what we're going to get, and that's still a borderline wide receiver one.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. You mentioned this, and I have to come back on this, and there's actually two guys that you mentioned I really want to talk about here. Let's start with Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden's been a huge riser on my board. He is someone that I am very actively targeting, especially in single quarterback, where I know the quarterbacks are going to fall. In Superflex, obviously, they're going to get pushed up the board. But if you're in that 103, 4, 5 range, I think you have to be looking at Matthew Golden. So what are, we talked early on, Shane, about the, film breakdown. What are some of the things you like about Golden, and why do you have him as your, potentially first wide receiver off the board in the real draft come the end of the month?
I think Golden is interesting. I've definitely been a fan since watching his high school film when he got recruited. He's a 4-star recruit, but went to Houston, was kind of behind Tank Dell there. I think it's one of the statistical questions on him is he never led a team really in receiving, in his college career, and that includes at Houston. So you're like, well, is this the guy? Then he ran the 4.29. Which is the fastest of this class. I think he's the fastest receiver of this class. But you watch some of the film, and there's times he gets tracked down. I mean, he doesn't necessarily, if he breaks one, he's not gone. I think he struggles in terms of angles and some of the football IQ things after the catch that I'm not as impressed with. I think he's a good route runner. I think he can get open. He's really good against zone coverage of where to settle down in that zone and use that speed and athleticism. Tracking the ball is good. Like, I think there's a lot of positive traits. I think there's some upside there that he just hasn't quite figured out. So, I guess it's a little bit of a cop out, but I think he's one of those players with Matthew Golden to say, okay, I think should be a first round pick, a borderline first round pick. I think the NFL is going to like him more than me. They're going to take him maybe in the top 20. But I think you're going to need a team that is able to take that skill set, that speed, that athleticism, and build in some of the football IQ moments, build in some of the potential that we haven't seen him hit yet in terms of yards after catch, etc.
Agreed. Kendall, I struggle with this because, and I think a lot of fantasy players are going to struggle with this because of the dual position for Travis Hunter. and I know I'm asking you this question specifically because I know you, and I know you are a big acquirer of draft picks. Is Travis Hunter somebody that you would use a pick on, or is he someone that you would rather wait and see and trade for later? I know that's kind of a cop-out question because the easy answer, of course, is wait, right? But like, we don't even know if he's going to play both positions. We don't know if he's going to. I mean, he's the best defensive back in the league in the draft. He's probably the best receiver in the draft. So, let's say you're on the clock, Hunter's on the board. You need a receiver. Would you rather have a McMillan, an Igbuka, a Burden, who we haven't spoken about yet, or would you take the shot on Hunter?
So we'll put it this way, right? Frame it with how it's going to go, which is we're drafting him high because said team said he is a receiving threat. All the hype, all the Pete Carroll-ness that you can possibly summon thrown at that, right? So we grab him, right? Here's my problem. That is true in that moment. But week 1, week 2, week 3, a good coach, Phil, you're a coach, right? Game plans change, right?
Totally.
If that changes, there is just no way I am drafting him where he's probably going to go just because I'm a fantasy player first. I played soccer, right? Like I love this game for a lot of reasons, but mostly because I'm kind of a nerd and I love numbers, right? And it happens to coincide with sports too, right?
Yeah.
But when I play the poker game here, it just doesn't make sense, right? There is no world in where he becomes more of a wide receiver, but there's every world where he becomes a cornerback in a non-IDP league for you, right? That's a realistic possibility. Just take your favorite wide receiver on your team, right? And say he's got to like run to the bathroom 5 times a game to some crazy health condition. And there is no way he will ever get above 6 to 7 targets because it just ain't happening. Now he becomes a touchdown dependent weapon for the most part when it comes to fantasy production, because I don't think he's going to get 12, 13 targets because of snap time. I think there's issues. I would rather have seen a comp first. Like there's a lot lower that he can fall than in terms of what's he going to be for me, because I can take any other player at that point and feel very, very safe that I might lose. What if you penciled in, you're going to lose 20% value on this year 1? I'm still going to take it because year 2, he could still be a cornerback and you could lose everything. So I'm hedging my bets. And there's a lot of players I like. Unless the market completely falls on him in a way that just won't happen,
Sure.
I'm out. I love the player, and I can't wait. I think he's the best pass catcher in this class by far. Matthew Harmon's reception perception just came out glowing all over the place for him. I love him. I just don't think he's going to translate to be a fantasy producer.
Can I ask you, Phil? Can I ask you where he went in your draft?
He went at the 104. He went at the 104. He went as the number 1 receiver off the board, and
that was 1 QB, right?
No, it's
Superflex.
It's Superflex.
Yeah,
it's Superflex. So it went Genty, Ward, Hampton, Hunter, and so that 12-team league, full PPR. To me, what's interesting is like and Shane, I want to kick this question to you as I make my comment here to let you kind of expand on my comment. I just don't see the ceiling being as high because I don't see him being a full-time player. I know we had Mike Vrabel come out last week, I think it was, saying, we'd be interested in having him play both ways. Patriots have the 103. He's been mocked there a ton. Shane, do you see him? Let's just assume that a team is going to draft him and want to use him on both sides of the ball. Obviously, that caps his ceiling. But if he's just a receiver, do you think his ceiling is still the highest in this class, or do you think there's other guys that have a higher ceiling? I know scheme and fit, we understand that, but just in a vacuum.
No, I mean, look, from a ceiling perspective, if he just plays receiver, then I could take him at the 104 in your Superflex draft. But I'm with Kendall. The nice thing is we get to, for most of these rookie drafts, get to wait until after the draft and hear what's going to happen, right? You're not. And we in our rookie guide, we have a 1 quarterback mock, 5 rounds, and a Superflex mock that our staff did. And I couldn't take Travis Hunter. Even he went at the 111, I think, in the 1 quarterback, and went in the 2nd round in the Superflex. And I was still like, I was starting to consider him. But because I think even in college, he played both ways. But there is film, and both at receiver and at corner, where he is winded. Like he's not it'd be one thing if he was playing at 100% capacity both ways every snap. And we're like, wow, this guy is that good. Yes, he won the Heisman being able to play at maybe 80 to 90% both ways. But there are games, go back to 2 years ago against Stanford, Alec Iomanner tore him apart because Hunter just, I don't think, had the conditioning at that point to hold up at corner. So that's my question. When we've seen players attempt to play two ways, generally it's been corners, Rod Woodson, Champ Bailey. As Kendall kind of said, that receiver aspect faded away very quickly because, especially a corner, you got to be on every play or they're going to throw to your side. A receiver, if you dog it for a play, no one might notice. But the other way, it doesn't work that way. So that's my fear. I hope that we get him drafted. Maybe 3 to the Giants, I think, is most likely. And they come out and say, hey, he's going to be a full-time receiver. That's where we're playing him. Then I can take him 104. But until that happens, I'm with Kendall.
Yeah, I'm with you guys as well. I mean, my other question, just again, the coach in me goes, look, you can play both ways in college. Obviously he's an incredible athlete. No one denies the athleticism, but it's it's the next level. It's a professional game, right? And is his body going to hold up? And I'm not talking about injuries, right? We Kendall, you and I talk about this on the show every time we do a show together. Anyone can get injured on any play. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying from the physicality standpoint, Shane, you just mentioned it, the conditioning, right? If you're not top, tuned in, are they going to throw at you every time? So my question is just, what is his body capable of doing if he does play both ways? And again, that lowers the ceiling if he's going to be doing that. So, Kendall, I know you wanted to talk about Luther Burden. So I'm going to kick it to you, and then Shane, I'm going to kick Emeka Egbuka over to you as well, because I think those are two players that guys in, I know my leagues, my home league, certainly everywhere in chat rooms have questions about. Kendall, let's start with you. Luther Burden, just give me your 2 cents. How high would you take him? What do you like about him, and why should fantasy players be looking at him if they're in that, I don't know, wherever you think he should be going, and maybe potentially the first round of rookie drafts, maybe second.
So I don't know where I'm at with him. That's why I want to bring him up. Let me put it that way. And I know I've got a 20-year that's been writing for the draft for quite some time and has scouted a little bit more than I have at the scouting level, right? So here's my thing. I've done my homework on Luther Burden. I still can't figure it out. I can't balance the ridiculous prospect that he was coming into college very early, his talents and attributes. I mean, everything tells me he can do amazing things at any level. And then this most recent year happened. It was a little weird. We've been getting burned by some gadget people, and he's not a gadget player. He's very, very good, but I almost want to put him in that category of how many more times can I get burned by this archetype? But is he good enough in the right coaching staff? So right now I'm below market, but it would take like a McVay to all of a sudden get me really, really excited. I was in on Xavier Worthy, not because I thought it would work in the NFL. I was in on Xavier Worthy because his landing spot was for me, can't miss overtime. That was me. Outside of injury, can't miss overtime. Where I said, no, Dell, that there can miss all over the place there, even after it was kind of happening for a little bit. So that's I'm more of a question. I can't give anybody advice on Burden yet because landing spot's going to tell me a lot, and I'm probably going to have to make a decision based on coaching staff, opportunity, vacated targets, those kind of analytics. But I almost want to throw the question back because I've seen him be very divisive, right? I've seen some rankings have him, a 5. I've seen him outside the 10. Shane, what do you think?
I think it's tough to make a defining decision on him. I mean, it seems more and more likely at best he's going to be a late first round pick, probably early second round pick. There's a lot of questions about, I don't want to say work ethic, because I don't think it's about his ethic, but he went to Missouri as a 5-star wide receiver recruit. That's not where 5-star wide receiver recruits go.
Right.
And we have NIL in the transfer portal, and apparently to keep him around, they basically said, look, you don't have to practice.
Yeah.
And he's like, great. I mean, I'm 19 years old, 20 years old. I don't want to practice, right? Who does?
Right.
So how does that translate to the next level when you haven't practiced in college? And I think if you watch his 2024 film, like, yeah, this guy's kind of average. Like, he's definitely a good athlete. They're just tossing screens to him. But I think Missouri went from one of the best offenses in the SEC in 2023 to me one of the worst, despite their record in 2024. Where like their offense, you just get it in Luther Burden's hands and let's see what he can do. And they didn't have the chutzpah up front to really block for him and do good things for him. So like Kendall said, like he's kind of an enigma because you could see him not being able to run these routes and doesn't know how to practice well, and it could burn out very quickly. But he definitely has that athleticism. He has the hands. I think when you look at his high moments, they look like a starting NFL receiver. So he's my number 3 receiver. I'll take him above Matthew Golden. I think we have him in one quarterback as the 105. Though I'd take some of the running backs who we'll talk about if they go in a good landing spot and good draft capital.
Yep, I'm with you guys. It's to me, if I'm in that mid to late first round, I'm just looking at best player available. And I think, Shane, you just hit the nail on the head. I'm probably going to pivot to running back. It's the most injured position. We all always need running backs on our roster for depth, regardless of who you've got as your quote unquote starters. Kendall, I know you and I are not always huge fans of putting a running back in that flex spot, but sometimes, like you mentioned earlier in the show, if you know you're going to get 20 carries, am I going to get 20 targets? Am I going to get 6 targets in some of these receiver positions? So it's a question of your roster construction and your build. Let's talk about Emeka Egbuka real quick, guys. These Ohio State receivers, I think, in my mind, are kind of second to the LSU wide receivers. Ohio State just continues to turn them out year over year, and Marv didn't live up to the hype in year one. We all, I think, would probably agree on this podcast that we believe Marv has much more in the tank and will become, hopefully, the prospect we all drafted him to be. But Shane, what's your thoughts on Egbuka? Where do you have him in your rankings? And, obviously we don't know landing spot, but what do you think he does as far as translation to the next level?
I wrote him up for Draft Sharks. You can see the full profile. He's my wide receiver 2 in this class. I think if you're in a PPR league, I would have him as the 104 in this class. I think he is an elite slot receiver. The slants, the burst off the line. He has a little bit of physicality to him when he does go down the field. Runs nearly a full route tree. We see the out routes, we see the in routes, we see the drags, we see the slants. He's run some 9s. Like I think he has a full repertoire there. Egbuka's not someone you want to put at the X, but
right.
But if I'm running an offense, he's going to be the first read on a lot of these plays where I can get 5-6 yards easy, and I'm just going to pepper him with targets. That's the player he is. I think he's going to get open, and if you get open, you're going to earn those targets, and I think it's exactly what Egbuka is going to do. So, as a PPR player, if you're getting points for receptions, I love him. If you're not, then not as much. I think that's his profile.
Yeah, and we're going to shift to running back here in just a second, guys. I just want to wrap the wide receiver class with this. It's important to note that Egbuka, as of this year, of course, is going to be drafted where he gets drafted, but this is a player that decided to go back to Ohio State for an extra year and was projected last year to be coming out early and was still a first-round pick. So I'm interested to see the landing spot. I'm really interested to see what role he gets, but I like Egbuka. Shane, I'm with you. He is very high on my board as well. He's a player that if I'm in that 104, 105 spot, that to me is a value because I do think he could be sneaking into the top 3 if you're in a single quarterback league and you really need a receiver, especially in full PPR. So, fellas, let's move into the running back spot. I struggle with this. My first question, and I'll just kind of open-ended. Whoever wants to jump in on it can. Here's my issue. I'm just going to say it. Here's my issue with Genty. He went to Boise State. And I know I get it. I fucking get it. Believe me, I do. But Shane, you just made the comment about a 5-star receiver in Luther Burden doesn't usually go to Missouri. So to me, it's like, I don't doubt that Genty is going to be a great player in the league. I think he's going to have a huge impact. I'm sure you guys saw it, but who's the my brain's going blank on me right now. But the Raiders' new GM, is it Spytek? John Spytek? Is that who it is? Talking about his son saying, well, I'll leave the house if you don't take him at number 6, which I kind of felt like was a shot at Joe Shane off of Hard Knocks last year of his son saying trade up to go get Jaden Daniels. But I think the way that the community, at least my impression of the Dynasty community right now, is drafting Genty is as if he is going to be a guaranteed Bijan /Gibbs. Shane, do you see it that way, or should we are our expectations too high, or are they spot on?
I think you're spot on. I mean,
Okay.
let's break down the why he went to Boise, right? Like, there's one thing if he was a 4 or 5 star recruit. He started playing high school football in Italy. Literally played inside a volcano. Is how he started college football, right? Got to play 1 year at Texas when a lot of these big schools had their recruiting classes done, and ends up going to Boise. I think over. I think Cal was the only FBS school that offered him, right? So I would go to Boise too over Cal. And I think when we talk about like level of competition, his best game last year was against Oregon. It was
True.
not
True.
against these Mountain West schools. That was
True.
his best game. He's running into 2 top 50 picks in Derek Harmon, Jordan Birch, and running them over, running through them. Got the top score in our rookie model. Actually, a better score in our rookie model than Bijan Robinson did. From my perspective, I've started scouting in 2004 for the draft. He's my number 7 running back of all time that I have scouted. So he's behind Adrian Peterson, Reggie Bush, Bijan Robinson, Trent Richardson, Todd Gurley, Saquon Barkley are my top 6. And all 6 of them hit as rookies. Trent Richardson fell off after that.
Right,
Reggie Bush, I think, did pretty well for fantasy at least. So, I mean, the explosion, the receiving's there. I mean, this year the receiving went down because it was more efficient to hand him the ball. I mean, he had over 5 yards of carry after contact. I mean, that's good yards per carry. So, his hips are a little tight. I worry if he's asked to go to a Shanahan scheme and you're running zone every play outside zone. I don't think that's ideal. But I think JT is slam dunk. I'm going to be taking him in the first round of redraft, let alone 101 in rookie drafts.
Wow. Okay, so there it is. So I think we're going to move on. I think Shane just did he had a mic drop moment right there. We're just going to move on at that point. So I do love the fact that he's 7 all time in your all time rankings, because the names that you just rattled off are, some of them are Hall of Famers, right? We understand Todd Gurley and his career and how it ended, but to get in that room with AP and some of those other names is big time. So Kendall, I know you are always a big fan of late running backs. I know you're targeting 2nd round running backs. I know you love to trade for 2nd round picks. Look, I think at this point, give me 1 second here. Amarian Hampton, right? Travion Henderson, Judkins. I mean, like, these are guys are probably going in the 1st round of your rookie draft. Kendall, give me some guys and some names that are on your radar if you are a early to mid or mid to late 2nd and you're in the running back market. Who are some of the names that you like?
Okay, 2nd rounders. I almost went straight to 3rd. And here's the thing. I'm going to have to go with a couple names here because landing spots are huge at running back, right? Again, the way I am not a crazy NFL scout. I'll be the first person to tell you I'm more of a game theory expert. I am not an NFL expert, which is why I like talking to NFL experts, because I think together we can do some damage, right? The way I see this is there's 1 or 2 pretty big tiers of running backs that have massive upside, and they all have some weaknesses. So I kind of want to see where they go. What I'm looking for is backfields where they can become a really elite 1-2 punch, right? Akin to, a Gibbs Monty, something along those lines, right? And I think there's a lot of opportunity with some of these backs. I don't see them as they're going to take over everything, but man, can they be a role player plus, a la Travion Henderson in college.
Yeah,
so just a couple names I'm loving right now, and I'll go down a little bit because guys like Scadaboo are rising really, really high. RJ Harvey's rising really, really high. So I think these guys are 2nd rounders, but let me reach a little bit lower to the next tier. I'm really liking Bashal Tootin and Dylan Sampson. Loving those 2. The speed they possess and what they can do with speed and strength as a combination. Because normally you've got a lot of these, burners, but they can't take the hit. Achane with volume, it lowered his efficiency quite a bit, right? I see these people more as like, can they do the Gibbs on 10 to 15 touches? Can they do some serious work? I think they can. I like those 2 guys quite a bit. If I want to dive even a little bit deeper, Damian Martinez is really interesting. This is a 3rd round pick, maybe even later, that I still think has quite a bit of talent just as a name. My favorites, I think it's gonna be 2-3 turn right now. If I had to get like one name that I'm becoming obsessed with, is Devin Neal.
Yeah.
Devin Neal is my best comp right now is David Montgomery. Actually, I keep coming back to he's a film guy. He just does his job, nothing more, nothing too fancy. DeAndre Swift needs to watch him because he could learn a thing or two. Just gets it done, one move, one cut. I like him a lot. I think he could do quite a bit of damage in a 1-2 punch. And then all those other guys, RJ, Bashan, Dylan Sampson, Ollie Gordon a little bit. I don't mind DJ Giddens. I've got some fades there, but all those names I'm pretty into.
So for those that are listening, obviously I'm not sharing my screen tonight. Again, if you are tuning in late to the show, I have one league that I am in that is drafting right now. Again, please don't do that. It is not recommended. Wait until these guys have landing spots, but that's how this league does it. Devin Neal, Kendall, as you just mentioned, went at the 205, Scattaboo at the 206, and Dylan Sampson at the 208. I took Jalen Milrow at the 209 because I needed a quarterback, and we are on the sleeper overnight pause at the 210. So TBD next week for all those listening. We will get into it a little bit more.
Is Jalen Noel off the board yet?
Say it one more time.
Is Jalen Noel off the board yet?
Nope, still on the board. Still on the board. So, Shane, last running back that I want to talk about, and this is a little bit selfish because he went to Florida before transferring to Georgia, and he has a last name of a brother who is in the league. Do you have a thought on Trevor Etienne? Is he a player that you think is going to translate? I know he's not being projected super high, but again, has that, I won't say famous last name, but, you know, has some connection to the league with his brother. But where are you on Trevor Etienne?
I think you're going to be surprised when we get to the draft. I think he's going to go in the top 100 of the NFL draft, despite never being a lead back. Like you said, he was behind Montrell Johnson of Florida, who's in this class, behind Nate Frazier, the true freshman in Georgia, but still had 600 plus yards, 6 touchdowns every year. I mean, the 4.42 40, you know, Etienne just really smooth, really glides. And I think he plays really smart. Stacks up the linebackers well in terms of the angles that he takes so that he can break a bigger run, an excellent pass catcher, good blocker, was suspended for a DUI for a game, but by all accounts, had a lot of contrition after that, really put his nose to the grindstone. So, you know, I like a lot of the names Kendall said, Bashal Tootin is definitely one of my guys, but I think Etienne is probably one of those players who, in your draft right now, Phil, is going to fall to the 3rd round, and I think he's going to be a late 2nd rounder in rookie drafts if he gets to the right spot.
Honestly, him having his brother's last name he thought it was good for a while from fantasy. It's actually not helping him right now. I have definitely noticed that he's falling in mocks just because people don't want ETN anywhere on their team. Not a bad tackle breaker for kind of a small guy too. He's got some.
I have the 301 and the 305 in this next round, and I'm not taking him to the 301. There's a couple other players that I'm looking at, but if he gets to the 305, he's certainly in my pool, and we'll evaluate at that time. So, for those that are listening to the show, for those that might be new to the show, we say it all the time, but once you get past the first 20 to 24 players, depending on your league size in the 3rd round, throw the rankings out the window, call your shot. Take a flyer on a guy that you like, that you believe it, because the 3rd round picks, the chances and the percentages that they translate to actually being a hit is so low. Take the guy that you think you like, or you just want to root for, or you think has an opportunity in a good landing spot, because you just don't know. So let's move to tight end, fellas. We got a couple guys, 3 players that I want to talk about. Let's start at the top. I think what we're, again, similar to what we talked about earlier with wide receiver, with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson kind of breaking the mold, we've seen Sam Laporta and Brock Bowers just truly spoil us these last 2 years at the tight end position, especially as how it translates to fantasy. Shane, I'll start with you. Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland seem to be the clear 1-2 in this class. I think most of the community is higher on Warren than they are on Loveland. Are we potentially seeing one of these 2 guys be a Laporta or a Bowers and really have a huge impact? Again, we don't know landing spot yet, but talent-wise, do you think these guys could really break the mold for fantasy this year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they're both deserving of being top 20 NFL draft picks. I think 22 is probably the floor for these players and Tyler Warren. And I think Loveland even has an outside chance maybe to go in the top 10 in the NFL draft. I mean, that's how talented they are. Warren is interesting because he had such a late breakout, but there's some fear there, but he's behind Brenton Strange, who was a top 100 pick, behind Theo Johnson, who's top 150 pick, right? And honestly, by the end of the season, was outplaying Theo Johnson pretty routinely. But he was a do-it-all player. I mean, he took snaps at quarterback. He was the tush-push extraordinaire for Penn State, running the football. Kind of a bigger Brock Bowers in terms of usage. I don't think he'll quite have that impact because of the size, but in year one. But I do think Warren is going to be drafted highly, and if he's drafted that highly, team's going to get him on the field and give him the football. I think Loveland's actually more athletic, and I think that could help us for fantasy. I mean, I'll take the value and take Loveland later than Warren, take Loveland in the second round of rookie drafts and be happy about that. Some connections there with the Chargers with his old coach and Jim Harbaugh. They could certainly use a pass catching tight end. The injury, I think, to Loveland made people kind of forget about him. Michigan wasn't throwing the football, but he can block. He has that explosiveness off the line. I think he gets open against linebackers very easily, and safeties just are too small to cover him. I think Loveland could really be a threat, and it's probably is my target.
Yeah. I like what you just said there, and I just want to, for those that may have missed it, the value of waiting to grab Loveland, right? You're talking about a guy who's more athletic, talking about a player who routinely is mocked to going to the Chargers. And of course, as we know, Jim Harbaugh being there, that's his old coach. So I do see Warren again. Last year, Kendall, you know this because we had talked about this. Bowers was super high on your board, but the question was, how high would you take in single quarterback, not in superflex? How high would you take Bowers, right? We talked about the big three. We didn't love the running back last year, but it was very clean chalk last year that it was going to be Marv, Neighbors, Rome. And there was leagues that I was in when I saw Bowers go with the 104. And knowing hindsight, that's what I mean. Hindsight bias now, certainly worth that, right? You could maybe make the argument he should have gone ahead of Rome in that case off of 1 year's worth of a sample size. So my question to you, Kendall, is Elijah Arroyo. I know you are probably targeting Warren and Loveland, as we all are, but in a league where the tight end position sort of falls off a cliff after the top 5 to top 7, really top 5 from a fantasy perspective, how do you see Elijah Arroyo this year as maybe a depth piece, or maybe a guy that if you have Travis Kelce and you're only going to get 1 or 2 years out of him, is Elijah Arroyo a guy that you're targeting? And if so, where?
So I'll say historically, my strategy with tight end was the good ones are overhyped because the position is undervalued in the NFL historically up until a certain point where the last couple of Super Bowl winners all have an amazing tight end, and it's a copycat league. And so you're starting to see earlier and earlier breakouts. We're breaking the records every single year with a rookie. I think times have changed a little bit, and I think the drafting community has gotten very, very sharp to catching up with the NFL in step, not even a year behind. We're getting very good at being efficient in our drafting, I think, which is quite nice. This year, we got like 6 at least draftable tight ends, even within 4 rounds, probably ish,
potentially.
So it's a large number of, hey, they could do something. I do think it's incredibly top heavy. Right. I don't think it's one of those like I can just wait, and Fannon's production doesn't make sense to me because this film looks atrocious. He looks unathletic for how much production he has, which feels really weird to me. I do like Arroyo, but I also like Ferguson, and I don't mind Taylor Mason either. So I do want to grab one at some point. For me, it's the same argument of when we're looking at a draft, we're looking at these other names. I think there's a big tier of like, honestly, I don't have Fannin and Arroyo in a team and a tier of their own, but Fannin, Arroyo, Ferguson, Taylor are all kind of, they could all make it or not make it. I kind of have them in that tier of later, and we'll see. Basically, if there's a running back I like, I'm taking them. Right?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
But if I get sniped, I don't love the wide receiver class, and I've already talked about kind of being out on the quarterbacks entirely once you get past the big ones. I'm gonna try to take a few shots on the later ones, because even as low as I think Ferguson's film looked good to me, it looked better than Fannon's, and Taylor Mason could do something. more so than I think half the tight ends currently in the league, and a lot of them are going to get phased out pretty quick. So I'd like to take one. If I can get one in the fourth when all the running backs dry up, because I think the running backs are going to get elevated. Shows are going to keep talking about the running backs, right? So it's going to elevate them. I'd like to take one. I don't see a late round value. I think because of the scarcity and because of how the tight ends have been hitting recently, they're going to be overdrafted. This might be a year where I have to be, if I have the right first round pick. I love me a Warren, and I actually do think to the Chargers in particular, that landing spot is just nasty for Colson. So
yeah.
I'd like one of them if I can. I'm just not going to overdraft them. Is the idea here?
Agreed, and I think we all probably, like you said earlier, the community as a consensus whole has gotten sharper, and how we draft has gotten a little bit more educated. There's more and more content being produced by people with data, people with video. I mean, there's just more and more for us to consume that is backed by fact, right? To say this is why you should or should not have an opinion about this player and where they could and couldn't go and what they can produce. So I think it's interesting when you look at, some of the players that we've talked about tonight. Again, we know not every player is a can't miss prospect. Guys bust all the time. Guys come out of, we've talked about Isaac Arendo on this show. We've certainly talked about players coming out of, Isaiah Pacheco having what his role will be this year. We'll talk about later as we get into the summer, but Pacheco being a super late draft pick, all of a sudden becoming very relevant for the Chiefs. Like, we know that they're players that are going to emerge. So, Shane, that's how I kind of want to wrap the show here tonight, is I want to ask you, with all your years of expertise, who is a player that we maybe didn't talk a lot about or just didn't talk about at all that you really like, that is someone that folks should keep on their radar for this upcoming rookie draft?
Man, wide open for that. So I'll go with the guy who I think is going to be a second-round pick in the NFL draft. I think I'll be bold. I think he's going to end up as a top 3 fantasy receiver from this class when we look back at 5 years, and that's Jalen Royals, the wide receiver from Utah State.
Wow.
Is super intriguing from a workout perspective. He's a 4.4 player. And, just what Royals does in terms of his footwork, and his route running reminds me a lot of what we saw with Rashee Rice when he came out of SMU. I think Royals does a lot of the same things where you can use him with that speed and athleticism in the shorter game, but also has enough to do some of the longer things. I think when he gets into an NFL system, he looks like a running back. And after the catch, Royals plays like a running back. I think if you can firm up some of the route running, I just think there's a lot there. I didn't think he could run routes, and then the Senior Bowl, Royals absolutely torched every corner he ran routes against. And so I was like, oh, that's the weakness, and he just proved he can do it. He has the release, he has the break point and the cutting. So he's probably the player that I'm staking my claim on. Round 2 of rookie drafts, I'll be drafting a lot of Jalen Royals.
Well, could I ask, because I literally today moved him up in my rankings because of some additional research. Could I ask you? So I have him in this sea of like Alec Imanor, Jack Beck, Jaden Higgins. He's kind of in, and I've been moving Noel up. I can't get him any high. I'm really liking that. Where do you see him fitting in that? I don't want to call it a tier because you have your own rankings, right? But where do you see him fit in that group?
No, to me, I think we talked about Tet, Egbuka, Burden, Golden, and Hunter as kind of a top tier first round picks. I have Royals and Higgins in that next tier together. Nice. With I think both of them have stud fantasy potential, and then after that is the next tier.
I might have to put him up another spot or two.
I was going to say, there you go. If you guys missed this show, you may have potentially missed out on a huge value here in Jalen Royals. So, Shane, I'm going to give you the screen. Please tell the folks where they can find you. Thank you so much for being our guest, and take as much time as you like to plug whatever you want here. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Absolutely. Check out draftsharks.com. We've been around since 1999. Like I said, we got the free prospect rookie guide, 100 profiles, comps of every single player, our own rookie model at work. You can download it for free. Go to draftsharks.com, plug in your email. And if you play redraft, you play Dynasty, consider a subscription. We sync with your league. We have a draft war room for your rookie drafts. You can literally sync your league, open up the draft war room, and it'll read the picks as they happen and tell you who you should take. If you're uncertain, you can go by what we do if you like what you heard here. A ton of other tools, best trade calculator on the internet, league analyzer, trade value charts, everything you want is at draftsharks.com.
Awesome, man. Really, really appreciate you being here tonight. Super good show, boys. It is always a pleasure to see you fellas. We will be back next week, and we will be talking next week. We will be talking about some trades. Kendall, I know you and I love to get into some trades because we are really next week. We're really on the cusp of the draft. So if you're starting to look at your
Bill, we have trades because we have problems as human beings.
Well, because we're degenerates, and this is what we do. Because I'm in a freaking league that's drafting on April 1st, and don't even have a landing spot. That's the ultimate degenerate gambling right there.
I love it.
But yes, if you guys please jump over to Draft Sharks. For those that are listening online, you can always catch up on Spotify and Patreon. If you are on YouTube, jump over to the Extra Point, jump over to Get Right Fantasy Network, to the Fantasy Football Tavern, hit that like and subscribe button. Help us continue to grow and of course support our brand. And we will be back in 7 days with more awesome content for y'all. So Shane, thank you again one more time for being the guest. Kendall, my guy, always good to see you. And as that, boys, is going to wrap it up, I think I got to find my outro.
Let's play some music.
Let's play some music. Why not? Oh, there it is. We out.
Wanted to write fantasy is the play. Marking nothing, but I tune in every Friday. Strategies provided, I will lock in every way. So go